Hello everyone, my name is Nangpo. For today's video, we're going to be talking about primary versus secondary sources. So when you're learning history or biology or like biology, I believe that you guys would have for sure know what we have is sources, right? Sources is basically a form of information. It could be textbooks, it could be museums, it could be real objects, it could be lots of other things. And for sources, we could define them into two groups, which are primary versus secondary sources. So what are they, and what's the difference between them? So first is primary sources. Primary sources are a source of information that comes from real events. For sure, it's real events, right? But it comes in that real time of the event happening, and it's more of like original and that are real. So some examples of primary sources could be like maybe a writing, like the Declaration of Independence paper, or like the USA Constitution piece of paper. That is basically what we have as our primary sources. Or when we're learning about like biologies of people, and we saw like, let's say like a writer, and we could saw like his original writings is his original written letters. That's what we have as a primary source. One other type of primary source are real objects, which for example could be like, if we look back in wars, then we could look at like the arrows and the types of like axes and guns and arrows that were used in that time. And this type is usually mainly seen in the museums. And there could also be like primary resources like flags and like uh, dirt and so on, things like that. Yeah, that is the primary source. One other super cool type of primary source that you would find having a really big impact is human sources. So how does this happen? Imagine, just for example, a war that happened about 10 years ago, and at that moment now you know someone that is in that period of time that has suffered and that have like observed that war, and so they are the primary source here. And so it's a lot much cooler to have a primary source as a human or as like someone who has actually observed it, because that's when they know about the feeling of what is it to be in that time, and they basically know and they share with us, and that's what matters so much. Next are secondary sources. Well, secondary sources are the sources that have been reported and is just originating from now. So it could be like from textbooks. Like history textbook is a type of secondary sources. You know that in the past, people they don't write down these types of information in a clear way like that for us, right? And so this is a secondary source. Next could be things like news or websites or like videos that people created back for the purpose of learning or the purpose of like uh, researching, things like that. That is a primary source. One other type of source that is really commonly seen is teaching. For example, your history teachers teaches you about what happened in maybe like in the Civil War. That's basically her or him giving us the secondary source. So these are the two main type of sources that you guys would mostly find when you guys are learning history or when you guys are learning biography or etc. Although these types of sources have a huge difference, it's important that we consider the alternatives of both and find out the most reasonable and correct answer for our learnings. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.